Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Comic Beat Insider. That's the pandemic Zoom mashup podcast that Heidi MacDonald of The Beat and me, Jimmy Aquino of Comic News Insider, started doing back in March during lockdown and said, hey, let's keep doing it.
Now in week
That's right.
22.
So, as I said, I'm Jimmy Aquino of the weekly podcast Comic News Insider.
And I'm Heidi MacDonald of The Beat at comicsbeat.com, the news blog of comics culture.
I'm David Monteith of Geek Syndicate, which you can find at geeksyndicate.co.uk. Been delivering quality geek podcasts for 14 years.
Yes, the UK version of Comic News Insider, JK. And join us for the first time today, and we're so excited to bring Class to the podcast. She is a award-winning, well-known BBC freelance broadcaster and journalist, also a podcaster in her own right, besides the radio show host on BBC Radio 4, the Front Row podcast, which is where I started listening to her years ago. She has her own podcast, How I Found My Voice, or How I Found Your Voice.
Right.
How I Found My Voice, yes. And also two-time winning champion of Celebrity Mastermind, and a big nerd in her own right, Samira Ahmed. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. I had the joy of, I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning to rewatch Shaun of the Dead.
Oh my God.
And it was weird watching it at that time of day. And I said to my kids, it's work.
That's the best kind of work, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I want to know what your specialist subject was on Mastermind.
And the first one was the novels and life of Laura Ingalls Wilder. And
Wow.
the second time, which was a Champion of Champions edition, so it was everyone who'd already won once playing each other. My specialist subject was a Jerry Anderson live 70s sci-fi series called Space 1999.
I love
And I
that. I
wore the
love
costume.
Oh,
Space
Which Jerry
1999
Anderson's
is
son
my...
helped me get.
So Big Finish, who do audio adventures, they do audio adventures. They're well known for doing Doctor Who audio adventures.
Yeah.
Was it earlier this year or last year? They brought out a Space 1999 audio adventure.
I know I was there at the recording of the first episode.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
Good. It was such a good. The way they deviated from the original canon was so respectful to it and so in tune and made it. Where I was just I was yeah.
Well,
That's
it's obviously
awesome.
not that whole episode, but I would say September the 13th is Breakaway Day, on the day on which in 1999 the moon broke away from Earth's orbit because of a massive nuclear explosion.
oh
Wow.
boy.
Literally every year on September the 13th, I post on my feed, never forget.
Well, this is like that was not a thing in the U.S. It barely came over here. I don't remember. I remember we talked about this on Twitter, I think, Samira, where I was like, yeah, we didn't really get that. If it did, it was probably a very
we
cult
did, but
following.
it's a small cult following, but they had a big convention, and it was in Philadelphia, I think.
Yeah.
Last year.
Well,
Oh yeah, no, yeah, we got it. It just wasn't very big. Over
yeah,
here.
it was Jerry and Sylvia Anderson, right? So
Yeah.
it was like they moved their technology that they had developed for puppets to actual humans. So it was, very bizarre.
I'll have to do a deep dive into that show.
Oh
today.
man,
Oh,
listen.
boy.
Listen.
Maybe we can do a
Oh.
podcast about it. But
Yeah.
today, guys, guess what? We're not here reining us back in. We're not here to talk about Space 1999. We're here to talk about Shaun of the Dead, the 2004 Edgar Wright film starring Simon Pegg, Nick Frost. I've got the list of all the actors here. A ton of other great actors there. Bill Nighy. Kate Ashfield is it?
Penelope Wilton.
Yeah. All sorts of a
Oh,
great
wow.
cast of people. Yeah.
Moran.
Lucy
Yeah.
Davis.
Dylan
Yeah.
Moran. Well,
Penelope
Stevenson.
Wilton.
I
Yeah.
can't wait to talk about this cast. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
it's
So,
a great cast and like lots of great things going on in there. So this came, like I said, in 2004, and it did pretty well for what it did. So I'm curious on when everyone first saw it. I remember when I first heard about it. 'Cause I used to go see movies all the time in the 90s and early 2000s. Like when Oscar time rolled around, I am barely hyperbolizing here, but I'd seen almost every documentary, every film, so I was pretty aware of film. But this one, I don't know, I just hadn't heard of, and I was sitting in a pub one day, surprise, and our waitress, who was a friend of ours from Ireland, had said, "Oh, have you seen Shaun of the Dead yet?" I didn't do an Irish accent, don't worry. And oh, they just said no, I can do it. And I said, "No, what is that?" And she explained it, and she almost sheepishly sort of said, "Oh, is this kind of zombie?" I go, "I love zombie. That sounds great. I have to go check it out." But I still didn't. I think I waited a year later after hearing all the buzz about it and bought the DVD, and that's when I was like, "What? This is amazing." But I'm assuming our Brits here probably saw it in the theaters, or no? Am I wrong?
I can't remember when I first saw it. I think I didn't see it that many years ago. I saw it on DVD. And we saw, we watched the rest of them, the whole kind of so-called Cornetto trilogy. And what's really interesting about it is, one, it's just such well-made films. And the time it came out, there'd been a history of the lottery fund had started, which was, the first big national lottery. And it was giving money to art projects. And a lot of the films that got funded by it at first, British films, were actually pretty awful. And I don't think this got any lottery money, but it stood out partly because it's such an excellently made film and it's so British, and the two didn't always go together. And the other interesting fact about it is, when lockdown happened, we had an American student who moved in with us just before the lockdown, who was studying at Edinburgh University, and we were thinking of something fun to show her. And the first film my children thought was, we'll show her Shaun of the Dead and then we'll show her the others. So it was like, it's the quintessential film you would show foreign people to celebrate the best of British culture. Right,
it's very British, yes. That's awesome.
I think I saw it in the cinema. And the reason I think that my memory, because I'm old, I forget stuff. But
I think we're all roughly the same age here, Dave. It's okay.
Yeah, we're all. Yeah.
We just look amazing. We're all, like this fine
this
Filipinos.
Is why I like Zoom, because it's got all your names on it. So
that's right.
But I was a huge fan of Spaced.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
Yeah,
same,
which is where I became aware of Simon Pegg and Nick.
So Spaced, yes, was the Simon Pegg sitcom Edgar Wright wrote on as well. Simon Pegg wrote. Nick Frost was in. Jessica Stevenson. A big cult hit over here as well. I have the whole DVD set myself. Yeah, for sure.
So when I saw that the same guys, and I love zombies, so when these guys are making a very British zombie movie, I mean, I'm like, there is absolutely no reason why I wouldn't go and see this. There's nothing in the world that would say, no, don't go and see this, Dave, because it hits everything for me. So, yeah.
Well, funny you mentioned Spaced, because it was sort of based on an episode of Spaced, which I also just rewatched again, called Art, where Simon's character is playing, I think, Evil Dead 2 or Evil Dead, one of the video games, and keeps having these daydreams of zombies around him. And there's a bit of a hint, and I think afterwards it was when him and Edgar were like, we should write a movie like with zombies, because that's what they sound like. And and I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So yeah, Heidi, how about you?
So I just saw it last night for the first time, and so one of the conceits of Comic Beat Insider is that Jimmy and I challenge each other to find the most outrageous film that the other hasn't seen yet. Outrageous. So with Jimmy, it's
as in we can't believe you haven't seen this yet.
Can't believe you. It's like you never saw.
I never saw the Evil Dead trilogy.
Right.
I'd never seen Willow.
Right, which is how we started. We started this, when Jimmy confessed that he had never seen Evil Dead. So we're like, well, we're doing a podcast.
Shame in my game.
About so anyway, so I guess I have to admit that me not having seen Shaun of the Dead is a little bit of the equal to Jimmy not having seen.
Yeah. There's no shame, Heidi. It's okay. Yeah. You're in a safe place.
Right.
Among your nerds. It's all right.
We're all ready for, as I said, my oven fresh take.
Nice.
On this. But I mean, of course I love Edgar Wright. I mean, I guess the first Edgar Wright film I actually saw though was Scott Pilgrim. And
which is a great film. Of
course, as long as this pandemic goes on for another year, I'm sure we'll get on to, Scott Pilgrim, an episode like 130 of this podcast.
Yeah.
But but I mean, I've seen him talk. I know, of course, the history of Spaced I'm very familiar with. So I am a huge fan of Britcoms, but the people that I recognized in this movie was more like, Dylan Moran. I'm like, Black Books. Samson Gregg does a little cameo. I'm like, Black Books. And Peter Serafinowicz. I'm a huge fan of Look Around You, his cult show.
Yeah.
And my ex-husband is English, so I have a whole, former education and all this.
Heidi and I are both big Anglophiles, so
yeah. Well, I don't know. That's a whole other podcast. But anyway, so I watched this last night. Of course, I knew everybody loves it. Everybody loves Shaun of the Dead. Everybody's always referencing it. So it's one of those movies. Truly, when I saw it for the first time, I was like, oh, that's where that comes from. And it's a delight. And of course, it's as English as can be. And very I will British, say that you definitely have to be an Anglophile or having having been to England many times and, lived with a Brit, I will say
I think
there was a lot of things I was like, yeah, that's dead on.
I think being English or an Anglophile, you definitely get things a little more, but you don't need to understand it or get it, I think. Because I know they even changed the line for American audiences.
Oh, which one?
When they go to, when Mary comes, the zombie Mary comes in the backyard, and Simon goes, she's so drunk. And originally they were going to say, because for listeners out there that are listening to this, in England, if you say pissed, it means they're drunk.
Right.
So that was the original line. She's so pissed. And they also knew, like, oh, Americans pissed is angry. So that's why they changed it. They're like, oh, we changed it. Then in the DVD commentary, it kind of sounds funnier too, saying the word drunk. So that was
funny,
the one that was.
I noticed that word and it didn't seem quite right because the dialogue.
That's funny.
When I talk about showing it to that American student, it's such a perfect film for its use of idiom, how people really talk, and celebrating the things. So there's that moment.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we're not too worried about spoilers, but there's a bit near the end where Simon Pegg and his girlfriend are sitting on the sofa and they're talking about what they're going to do on a Sunday. And that's exactly what I think would be the kind of quintessential average fantasy, which is, we'll get the papers in, we'll have a fry, we'll go for a roast, we'll go to the pub, and we'll watch TV. And, just every little detail, mundane detail of it, it's just right.
Yeah. Yeah. Last time I was in the UK,
except the word drunk.
Yeah.
It has a very special. But I'm also very excited for the film for another reason, and it has a very special place in my heart because all the locales in it.
Yes, you lived in Crouch End.
I lived in all those places. I spent time in all those places in North London.
I stayed with you in Crouch End that one in 2008. Yeah.
And it's like they're walking. I go, I know where that is. I've been in there. I know where that is. I've been in there.
Nice.
I've gone into that corner shop. and it was just like, it's always exciting when you see places that but when places intimately, it just took it to a whole nother level.
Well, but there is no Crouch End tube stop though.
No.
Yeah, I will say to that, David, it's like they shot I Am Legend, a lot of it right around where I live in Manhattan. And so whenever you see your home like destroyed by vampire zombies, it's always a little disturbing. Little like, I'm not
just
sure I like that. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure all of us being New Yorkers and Londoners, we probably see things being shot left and right all the time. So I especially when I lived in Hell's Kitchen, every other day was like, oh, there's another Law and Order set. It's like there's 12 Law and Order shows, or there's another film being shot there. Yeah.
I mean, this is a total tangent, but the Daredevil, the Netflix Daredevil TV show, they shot that right over on 3rd Avenue, and like they're coming out of my favorite sushi restaurant, East, which isn't there anymore. So it's always good to have these memorialized. But anyway, just to as the newcomer to the Shaun of the Dead.
Initial thoughts. What do you think?
Initial thoughts. Yeah. Well. I mean, I did do no, it's great, it's all good, but I mean, reading up on the movie, reading up about it a little bit at the time when it came out in 2004, it was a reaction to 9/11, and of course, watching it now, it's just as germane, but in a whole different way. However, it is referencing Dawn of the Dead. I mean, George Romero's classic Dawn of the Dead zombie film, and then also Zack Snyder's remake of it, which came out I think after this.
No, it came out 2 months before because it was part of the deal that they're like, we have to put out Dawn of the Dead first.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So all of these, they all kind of reference the idea that we're zombies in our real lives. Like we're already zombies. Like the opening of this film is very explicitly, so many, people in lines just lined up, mindlessly moaning
on their phones,
and which are not iPhones. That was their little like, burners. They didn't
love my little burners.
Razors in this film. It's pre-clamshell.
We're all drug dealers, yes.
Yeah. So it's starting out with that conceit of are we zombies in our real life? And I think that's kind of like, the little thread that kind of goes through this a little bit. I mean, we see Shaun so many times, like, shuffling like a zombie, and obviously at the end,
the drudgery of work. Yes.
So, if anybody is watching this who has not seen Shaun of the Dead,
we're going to spoil it. So
we are going to spoil it and stop. And you know what? It's got a really good ending.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it,
so stop, go watch it, and then come back and listen to it later.
And then come back and watch us talk about it. Okay. But at the ending, obviously, also references the fact that zombies can be incorporated into our everyday lives very,
Well,
you
they're
know.
exploited as slaves, though, elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My daughter said she doesn't like this. Is in a way the least favorite of hers. I said, why? Because I think it is exquisite, and I think she just finds it too depressing, because you have to stop and think about who's actually still alive at the end of the film and in what circumstances. And so just in terms of body count, because you do genuinely learn to care about everyone in that family group. And I think on that simple level, I think she prefers Hot Fuzz.
Except for David, but yeah.
Oh
Hot
my
Fuzz
God.
is great, yeah.
So
Not you, David, the Dylan Moran character.
Can
David.
we talk about Dylan Moran for a moment? Because
He's
again,
great because he's such a dick in it.
I try not to spoil movies for myself, okay, before I see them. So I didn't look at the cast. I didn't do any research beforehand because I want to have it fresh. So when I saw he was in this, I was like, I crowed with delight. And, huge fan of Black Books, obviously. And I actually got to see him do stand-up one time here in New York.
Nice.
Which is amazing. But, I mean, God, he's just so funny. Every single line he says just had me cracking up. Just how his
delivery.
Yeah,
he's such a jerk.
But his delivery
I think
was
every disaster movie, every apocalypse movie needs a weasel.
Yeah.
And he was just so
perfect.
It was such a beautiful weasel.
Yes, a beautiful.
Yeah, I remember him saying, and they were sort of like that he really thought that David Williams was going to get the part because David was of course friends with him. David had been in space. He was in that episode of Art that this was based on, and I think he does one of the voiceovers in it as well. So that he really thought, he goes, oh, I thought David would be great. Like, oh, but then Simon was like, when you came in though, you really nailed it. But we were like, this is David. So yeah, it was God, such a solid cast. It's such a so.
And I think one of the reasons. Well, there's two reasons fundamentally it works. One is it's so exquisitely written and shot. Like there's a lot of very hard edits, and it's so beautifully paced, so you don't lose concentration for a second. And I think it's really something how film sustains that pace. And if you look at something like Baby Driver and its exquisite use of choreography and music, he's such a brilliant director, and his vision is just a joy to watch. It's not show offy for himself, it's genuinely delightful to watch. But the other thing that I think is really powerful about it is there's something that's a really true idea, and I love the idea that underneath the zombie film is actually quite a touching film about turning and this whole existential crisis, and about his relationship with his girlfriend, and that whole love triangle, because Dylan Moran is obviously secretly in love with her, and his girlfriend who knows it. But also, and this I found myself thinking about, is the mother played by Melanie Wilson, who not only have a crush on, which is a classic thing about people having crushes on each other's mothers, but also when she hides the fact that she's been bitten for ages, and watching it, only when you're watching it on a repeat do you notice the first time.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can't quite remember when did it happen. And when you first got to notice her fussing with her sleeve, and her keeping it hidden because she didn't want to cause a fuss, and sorry, let me bring the tone down. I mean, this is something that happens, and I've known it happen in my extended family. A mother who kept quiet about the return of her cancer because she worried about, there was a big family wedding, and by the time she spoke about it, it was too late. And
there's a definite generational thing to that as well, isn't there?
There is a male version of that too. It's not just women not doing it, but there's something particularly heartbreaking about that because it really is true.
Yeah, it really. I mean, I rewatched it 3 times the last week because I hadn't seen it in years, and then I was like, oh, let me watch with the DVD commentary with the cast, and then they had this on the DVD. They had this thing called the Zombometer, which I don't know if you guys had over there. You guys, did you ever have pop-up music videos on VH1? Do you know what that is? So VH1 was like an MTV sister station, was more like adult contemporary hits.
Yeah.
And they would have this thing called pop-up videos where during the video, little things would pop up like thought balloons with information. Oh, this was shot over here. Oh, his friend's there in the background, or this and that. So the Zombometer, when you watched it, that's what happened. Anytime music came on, this is the artist. Oh, Shaun and Nick actually improv the scene, the only scene in the there's somebody's there. So I watched it that way as well, which had lots of great information, and, which we can get to. But yeah, going back to real quick to Heidi's point about like just all the references, there are so many references to other movies, especially Romero's stuff, to even his own work in space, like the whole again in the Art episode where Jessica Stevenson's character said, oh, it's Nick Frost character is on the phone. He's like, your boyfriend's on the phone. He's like, he's not my boyfriend. He's like, hey babe, which of course we see later on in the pub scene. You know, get the beer. It's a little warm for you. Thanks, babe. You know, and so there's all these great references throughout the entire film. And then when you see these sort of behind the scenes things, how much you're like, oh my God, how well researched they were, Edgar and Simon, of all this, just students of film. Like certain shots were homages to other films. Like, oh, that's from Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, it was amazing to watch, like all these different just, and then not knowing, like you said, Samira, not knowing it the first time, but the rewatches, starting to notice this more, and to Penelope Wilton's scene, you know, like watching that, like there's some solid hardcore acting in this movie. There is some, like Simon Pegg's range in this is amazing. Watching Penelope Wilton, just that scene at the end where she turns, it's so heartbreaking.
Oh,
and they even say, they talked about, Simon's like, yeah, Nick, Kate, and I, we had to walk away and have a little cry because afterwards, because we were so, because it's Penelope Wilton, you know, and it's like, well, she's so into it, you know.
She was so good.
I find it hard to believe that, you know, their first choice, they asked Helen Mirren.
I don't think. Oh yes, that's right. And she turned it down because she
because Nick Frost's character had better lines. Is that it?
Something. It was something about like she wanted funny. She wanted a funnier role. She wanted to be funnier.
Yeah,
something like that.
She would have been terrible in the role if she wanted to be madcap. Because the whole reason the mother character works is because she is so sincere about everything, you know, and she's
but
just.
It certainly would have rung true that the Nick Frost character had a real thing for her.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I still have a real thing for Helen Mirren, so I get it. I think we all do. Yeah.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
I can watch Helen Mirren. I can watch Helen Mirren read the phone book. It's fine.
You know, I think that's also what struck me about this, actually, when you talk about Simon Pegg's range. And so a lot of times when Jimmy makes me watch a movie that I haven't seen before, I have an idea in my head of what it is. And when I watch it, I'm like, oh, it isn't that at all. And the reason why I didn't watch it is so wrong. And the reason that, you know, what I discover about it is why it's a classic. I mean, we certainly had this 2 weeks ago with Battle Royale, which I was like, oh, this movie's going to be
so good.
And it turned out to be such an amazing movie about.
And there's a Battle Royale reference in Shaun of the Dead.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
There's a poster in the background. Yeah.
So with this, you know, I mean, I expected, knowing, you know, enough about British comedy, that it would be very funny, which it was, but Simon Pegg, I mean, he showed so much range, and as I was watching it, I was just amazed by just how great he was in this movie. Like, you know, at first he starts, you know, there's such a tradition of, well, you know, another one of my favorite shows is Peep Show with not with David Wallace.
No, David Mitchell. Yeah.
With David Mitchell and
Mitchell and Webb,
Mitchell and Webb, Robert Webb, and so
and Olivia Colman,
and there's, you know, the relationship between the two schlubs. So I mean, you see that right away with the video game schlubs. But then when he goes to the store to work, he's really trying to be the manager. You know, you see him learning,
trying a little,
trying. He's trying, but you see that he yearns to be a leader. Like, he doesn't want to be like, you know, he doesn't want to be like his roommate. Yeah, I think reluctant. I think that was his real dream, right? What's the plan? You know, or like he wanted to be the guy who was like leading everybody to safety. You know, I mean, that was, and he really showed that. You know, he showed that.
But there's real pathos in that, because in trying to be that person, he made everything worse.
Right. Oh yes.
For like everybody, you know, people died because he was trying to do the right thing.
Like that climb up that child's ladder in the backyard, where you only see his feet, and it's just like, is it clear? No. How many other? Lots. And it's like, oh my God, you just see the pain in his face of like, what have I done? Oh no. So great. So yeah, we start off the film. We immediately get the characters right away, and what a great setup too. We see Shaun and Liz, Simon Pegg and Kate Ashfield, talking about the relationship, and she's clearly unhappy because he's sort of, as Heidi was just saying, he's sort of just like not sure about his life, what he wants to do. He's living with he's letting his roommate sleep on his couch, or his friend sleep on his couch, and aimlessly sort of going through life. and she wants a little more out of it. And then just the thing that they don't show the friends at first, then they cut to them when they're talking about them. It's so brilliant. Like, not that I don't like you, Ed. You know, they're like, not that I don't like you, you know, David and oh god, what's Lucy's character's name? I just totally blanked.
Diane.
Diane, yeah. Not that I don't like you guys, but yeah, that was such a great way they shot that. So cool.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, one of the returning you know, jokes is that they can't escape this pub, you know, and the girlfriend,
the
Winchester and Liz, which, you know, again, like the writing on this is so tight, like it's called the Winchester and that comes back, but and you know, that's a very British thing, like the pub being the home away from home, and you know, maybe the home too much away from home, and you know, Liz is longing to escape the orbit of the Winchester, and Shaun literally, even in a zombie apocalypse, cannot escape the Winchester. He can only go back to the Winchester. It's the whole sum of his being is that the Winchester.
Yeah, just the irony about that location, because at the time, and David, you might remember, do you remember that the Labour government went through banning smoking in public places?
Yes.
And pubs were one of the last places you could smoke. And there was this huge issue about when smoking got banned in pubs, although lots of people welcomed it, including pub workers. It led to loads of them closing because a drink and a smoke was a kind of thing that people did. And the big pub closure thing started to happen. Maybe this is a couple of years ahead of it. I could be wrong, because I noticed Nick
I think it is literally a couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, he talks about the pub being one of the few places he could smoke, because he's obviously not allowed to smoke in the flat.
Yeah,
but I just think there's something poignant about that. And it's funny because I work in news partly, and there's been this whole thing in Britain with the lockdown about how some people say the government seems to put more effort and concern into reopening pubs than into reopening schools, and that there's a tension between the two. And certainly it's interesting that there was a real anxiety in the late 2000s about the British pub disappearing, because they were closing at the rate, I remember reporting it, they were closing at the rate of 8 a week. And there's still a lot of it, ones closing down and and being demolished or converted into odd shops and things. And so it's very interesting that right now it feels like the pub is suddenly re-energized in a way as this totem of normality. So if you compare the pandemic to a zombie apocalypse, which of course with the empty streets and everything, there are all these comparisons. It is the place. It's become this beacon where you would go when the pandemic is lifting and lockdown is lifting. Going to the pub became this symbol for the government, no less, of normality. So
that makes sense.
A whole new level of meaning there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as I've gone to Britain, and I first went, I'd go to Comic-Cons, and people would stay up drinking all night, and in New York we stay up all night drinking if we wish, or in my youth, in Jimmy's youth, we would stay up all night drinking. And I remember, so when I went to England, my shock that the pubs closed at 11. Right? And I mean, I was devastated. And it's like, how do you get home? How do you do this? And then I realized that everybody goes to the pub right after work and stays there. And if they didn't close at 11, no one would go home. So, like they really had to just say, yeah, sorry, time's over. You got to go home, wake up for work the next day. So I don't know. That's my take on it.
Well, you do know why pubs close at 11.
Why?
It was a wartime thing.
Yeah, from the First World War, wasn't it?
Yeah. And they lights out, so you wouldn't be targets for bombing, so you had to close the pubs early.
I thought it was to do with munitions workers. They didn't want to control people's sort of spending and stuff, and how.
Oh, that's interesting.
But they just never got round to changing that law.
I mean, they did because one of the big things that the Labour government did was they brought in a big deregulation of gambling, and they did a big deregulation of drinking. So late licenses and places being able to stay open all day was a Labour thing. They used to close
one took advantage of it.
And then reopen at 6. The pub wouldn't open at a certain time and stay open till 11. It would open for a lunchtime session, 12 till 3, then shut again, and then reopen in the evening.
Well,
That's sort of standard New York restaurant too.
my
Shut down between lunch
my
and dinner.
theory is still that someone realized that if you went to the pub for a proper session, drinking a session beer,
You'd never go home.
and
You'd never
but
leave.
but if you went like after work and started a session at like 6 and went till 11, and then you went home, if you drank that, you could still get up in the morning. You know what I'm saying? It's like it was just the right window where if you drank.
Depends how much you drank. I think you'd be quite generous.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe it's just the English people I hung out with. Okay, because
Yeah, it's
I
the
learned
English
a
comic.
really interesting fact about pubs last night. I was presenting front row, and we were having debate about book publishing. It's been Super Thursday, where they published nearly 600 hardbacks in the UK yesterday. And I was talking to people in the industry about, what was going on. One of the questions I asked is whether book buying had gone up and would go up, more now. And this guy said they actually had the data to show that when pubs reopened, book buying went right down. And so it's
Wow.
like sitting at home reading books until the pubs open.
Oh my God.
It was such an
Wow.
statistic. I know it's hugely sweeping, but they actually correlated the dates. I mean, they could match the dates.
Wow.
People had been waiting for the pubs to reopen.
Well, what's interesting is about like as we see here, like Simon and Nick are big drinkers. We see that in not so much on Hot Fuzz. We definitely see the World's End because the whole idea of the movie is that it's a pub crawl. Yeah.
Let's not forget pork scratchings.
Yes, yeah. Well, they call them pork
scratchings.
scratchings. They keep calling them different names, hog lumps and whatever. All these other different
nibbles.
Yeah,
Would be
I had
saved by nibbles.
I had my first pork scratchings with you, Dave, and your brother,
Yes,
I
you
think,
did.
at Grouchin at a pub.
I've
What's
never
that?
eaten one. I've never eaten one.
It
Really?
absolutely depends on the make because you
Yeah.
get some quite. I was going to say craft pork scratchings, but that's a bit of a leap.
Yes, the craft
get-
pork scratchings
you get
are
some
made from
people
the.
You get some producers who put some quality into it, and they're very salty, they're very
Yeah.
crunchy.
They're chewy.
No, they're very crunchy. Yeah, they're
Very
really
crunchy.
crunchy.
It's
Yeah.
basically fried fat.
Fried pig,
It's like fried
pig back.
Yeah,
I
it's fried
feel like
pig
the ones
skin.
I had hair
But
on them.
the really cheap ones are absolutely disgusting, and in
Yeah.
general they are
Which is
disgusting.
what I
but
had.
About once every 6 months, I get an urge I can't deny for some, and I have to
Sure.
try them, and then go, I can't do this again for another year. But
Yeah, I hear you.
months,
Well,
it
what I
creeps up.
found interesting, I was gonna say, is like I actually did. I don't know if you guys have ever interviewed any of them, but
I've
at-
been to
oh, you have, yeah. I for what? For which movie?
for Star Trek Beyond, actually.
Oh, of course. Oh, awesome. That's great.
Mm.
They were doing the World's End press room at San Diego Comic-Con when it came out. So I did that press room, and it wasn't actually that crowded. Not a lot of media was in there. So we did the round tables where they come around one by one. There's only like 4 of us at the table each time. So I got to talk to Simon, Nick, and Edgar each. And I remember everyone kept asking questions about drinking. And Nick was like, we're just acting. We're not really drinkers. We're not like we don't yeah, it's just like people are like, can you neck a pint? He's like, yeah, I kind of, but it's not really. I don't really do that. So
It's fascinating that you missed the point, because I think, again, one of the reasons this film works so well is it's unashamedly a male point of view, but it's done with this generosity, and all the women characters in it are actually fully rounded.
Yes.
So it manages to be honest and yet not manage to be, sometimes films can be very, very male and exclude women, and this doesn't do that. And it's incredibly what's the word? When you're sort of self-depreciating, what's the word?
Self-deprecating.
Self-deprecating, that's the word. Self-deprecating about aspects of masculinity. I love it. There's a lot of vulnerability in here.
yeah, I think some of the strongest performances are from the women. Like, of course, we said Penelope Wilton, but my God, from Kate Ashfield and Lucy Davis.
So,
Lucy.
Well, yeah, I'll just say real quick, this Lucy rewatching. And seeing those moments of Lucy Davis's character, Diane, knowing that her boyfriend is in love with Liz, but just those moments where he like sort of just like dismisses her, and watch her face in those scenes, you're like, oh my God, poor Diane, like this strong woman who's just sticking with him, staying by his side, even though she knows that he's in love with her best friend, and just watching her face, it's like, oh, it's so heartbreaking.
Also, the one thing I find difficult is what happens to her, because you never quite find out. And she's so brave when she plows into the crowd.
You do find out in the DVD extra So we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute. But Heidi, you were going to say something.
I
Sorry.
know. I was just going to say that, we kind of have this parallel group of survivors that it's led by a woman, and I'm forgetting her name, but she was played by
Jessica Stevenson.
Jessica Stevenson from Space.
Yes,
right.
Vaughn.
So right. And so I was, so you kind of see the mirror image absolutely to what Samira was saying. It's like,
and their team's a little better. They seem to
have their team's got
they actually have weapons.
They have weapons, but they also have Tamsin Gregg in it, and they have
Matt Lucas
and how can I forget the best one of
Martin
both?
Freeman.
Martin Freeman in it. So and you see like they have this confrontation at one point, and you can see that Simon Pegg's group is trying, but Jessica Stevenson's group is just a little better, and she's really got it together. And
isn't it more just the idea of in a zombie scenario there'd be other people doing what you're doing, so it's just an element of stepping back from yourself, and the idea of you might find an identical Doctor Who in an episode.
Right.
But you can see she's a better. You can just see she's better at it. She's a woman, so she knows better.
Well, even her reaction to him going to going to the Winchester, the pub. Like she's like, you idiot! Are you serious?
How many of her group have survived at the end?
What's that?
How many of Jessica Stevens?
Yeah, exactly. Like all we see is her. So it's
right.
I thought there was something a bit cryptic about, is it just you? And it gives her a look, and it's like, but it's just you.
Yeah.
So I thought it was more a match of equals, and it has their exact counterpoint. So right down to
that's the point, though, I think, because you had these equals, you had these people, and each person had their counterpart in the other group, but it just took one right decision to make things go better.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah.
And it's all about making the right decision at the right moment with the right perspective. And she just had clearer perspective than he did. And you see in her what he could have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's a tragedy in that, actually.
Yeah.
And actually, sorry, I just love Jessica Stevens.
She's great. Well, I do like that
she was great in Doctor Who.
Yeah, yeah.
She was in the double episode Family of Blood and Human Nature.
The one where we went back in Tennant, yeah.
And it was where Tennant he'd taken his own memory away, and he thought he was a professor from sort of World War I times, and she'd basically fallen in love with him.
Mm-hmm. She's so good in that.
And she was so good. I don't know,
Yeah.
Her name should be whispered with reverence.
Yes. Well, also what I love about that scene where they run into each other is like the first few, at least, were counterparts not just in the movie but also on other TV shows. Like Martin Freeman and Lucy Davis were in the original The Office. Like we said, Dylan and
Samson Gregg.
Yeah, they were in a show together, Black Books, right? And then of course Jessica and Simon were in space together. So it's kind of like, you are your counterpart.
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, it's funny that it was just this little cameo, moment. But I mean, the superstar cameo moment.
I just got totally freaked out by a tail.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know.
It was just a tail, and
I know the cat. The cat always. I'm surprised they haven't showed up for the chat, because usually when I start zooming, they love it and they show up right away. But they've been giving me time.
I'm sure you noticed this. Again, we're just jumping around, whatever. But one of the other brilliant things about the movie was that everything was repeated. Almost the entire movie had repetition, where things were early on in the movie. Like any character you see early in the movie, later on is back as the zombie.
Right.
Full-on lines are repeated by other characters back and forth. You've got red on you, the whole look at me, it's just this sort of balance back and forth, and it works so well watching this repetition, because then you go again, like Samira saying, going back to watch, you start noticing more and more. You're like, oh my god, that is brilliant.
This atmosphere of deja vu, which is a very powerful feeling. And it's done. I mean, I just like the way this film. It's done so well that I don't think you miss anything important on your first viewing.
Yeah.
You might get more. I mean, I have never watched Spaced. I probably will now.
Oh, you have to,
I saw Simon Pegg in that episode of Black Books where he's the weird manager of Goliath books. and I noticed him as just this amazing talent then.
Mhm.
But the fact that I never watched Space doesn't mean I haven't watched repeated viewings of this film. And I just think that sense of deja vu and the part of the eeriness of, when that morning routine when he walks out the house,
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
over the curb, goes into the shop, and then
Yeah.
they replicate that whole sequence in one
Yeah.
take. And every little detail is just completely off the
Yeah.
second time.
It's so
It's just
amazing.
moments like that which are so powerful, because that's part of the power of great science fiction, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's playing with your expectation and the normality, and then repeating it in this weird alternative world
What's
where
funny is
everything is wrong.
he shot the zombie version of that scene first. He said
Oh,
that was yeah. He said that was actually his first day. We did that shot first, and then later on we did the first shot. Like that. But the zombie version is so great because like he just doesn't notice things. He opens a little soda thing, doesn't see the blood hands, and when he slips, and clearly slipping on blood, it just keeps going. Oh, it just keeps going.
Yeah,
It's like
it's
so
genius.
great. Oh my
Genius.
god,
bloody
I
hands
love
on
it.
the fridge door.
Yeah, right.
there's
Yeah,
so
the bloody.
details that are just
Yeah.
there and lightly played. You have to, and that's the other thing. What I love about this film is you really would have to concentrate. You would miss something.
Yeah. Well, that's where I want to.
I'm a fan of quiet cinema where people aren't talking through a film. I think Edgar Wright, did us so many favors in making a film that teenagers and young people would want to watch, but would have to concentrate on and not talk if they were going to get all the joy.
Right. Well, I'm curious about on your rewatches and then this Heidi's first watch. Did you notice the foreshadowing that some characters did?
Absolutely.
Like yeah, and where Ed basically gives away the entire movie in his plan. So I have it here where he talks about his pub crawl speech to Shaun about what they're going to do. We'll start off with a Bloody Mary. That's Mary, the first zombie. We'll get a bite of the king's head. The king is Philip. His stepfather. Yeah. Pick up a couple at the Little Princesses. Pick up David and Di at Little Princess Liz. Stagger back where they impersonate the zombies to the pub and end up at a bar for shots back at the Winchester, and they're literally shooting people. I'm like, so he totally just completely.
Genius.
And like they even said another little thing in the Zombometer was every character's name rhymed with sort of their fate. So Dave grave, Di dies, but as we find out of the DVD extras, maybe not. Liz lives, so it's kind of right. Ed dead, Phil killed, Yvonne moved on, Barbara cadaver, which is a kind of one, but yeah. So they kind of like they kind of did.
Yeah, I mean, I missed some of those. I mean, I'm definitely, as with all these movies, going to watch them again as they, you can watch them again. But to what you were saying about the doubling and the repeats, like they show, the rescue of Mum, and killing Philip, and also, by the way, shout out to Bill Nye.
Bill Nye, my God.
He is just, I mean, he's genius at everything. And
I read it under a cold tap. Oh my God.
Because I didn't want to cause any bother, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
I have to say, going back to the Helen Mirren, Bill Nighy casting that might have been, because I've interviewed Bill Nighy as well, and Bill Nighy is an incredibly stylish, charismatic man, and so he was up for playing Dowdy. And I think it's interesting, if he and Helen Mirren had been paired, it would have been so ludicrously glamorous and sexy.
Oh, yeah.
I would have believed it.
Yeah.
No, this was perfect casting. The casting just worked.
Oh, God.
So yeah. But I mean, just
like, so, he's actually the best dressed man I've ever met.
Really? Well, I mean, Samira, I'm just saying. But okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But Bill Nye really does wear beautiful suits and things, and really knows clothes. He knows women's clothes as well. And so he was wearing really, dowdy sort of little.
One of the first times I saw him was under all that ludicrous squid makeup in the horrible Pirates of the Caribbean sequence. It's like, how do you take this, debonair, elegant man and put him under all those squids? No, don't do it. Don't do it. But anyway.
Do you know how they all met? It was apparently at Love Actually, either auditions or whatever, because Simon was up for the role that eventually went to Mr. Bean.
Rowan Atkinson.
Rowan Atkinson, yes. Yeah, so Simon was up for that role. And also, I think she was up for the role that eventually went to Laura Linney. And so I think they did readings together, or they were in the same room. That's how they kind of met. I think it was something like that, which is very interesting. Would have been a different love actually, but that still would have probably been really funny.
Eyeshadow is really good in this film. You know, when at the beginning in the pub, it's a really lovely blue. And
right?
got a real thing about when eye makeup is done well.
Yeah.
And a woman notices. And this is up there with, I know it wasn't a great film, but you know the second Snow White film, the one that didn't have Kristen Stewart in it? The eye makeup they did on Charlize Theron.
Right.
The blue again. I really liked it.
Yeah.
It's true. I noticed that too.
I
was like,
I missed that.
Yeah.
No, I noticed it too, because especially when he comes over to her and they're getting ready to go out, because she's pissed at him. She's like, and they mentioned that in the commentary as well, how she like got all, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's just
rings really true, doesn't it? Like, you know,
yeah,
she's a good-looking woman. She's down to earth. She's not like super glamorously a celebrity, but she's gorgeous and she made an effort. And you know, you know, she stands out.
But I think that was also just part of the genius casting of this. You know, it's like, you know, she's significantly above Shaun. You know, he's dating above his. You know, he's
punching above his weight.
Punching above his weight, but she's also just, you know, like, I mean, of course. I mean, not to make this Heidi's confessional, but, you know, I said my ex-husband. And so, you know, like when you're hoping your man will not spend so much time at the pub. I mean, I really did relate to that. So anyway.
It goes both ways. I had an ex-girlfriend who would spend a lot of time at the pub too.
I've seen like, that too. Yeah.
Just to go back to the thing you said about the foreshadowing is it's quite near the beginning. Pete says to Ed, goes, why don't you just go and live in the shed?
Yes.
Which of course is where he ends up. And he says, the next time I see you, you're dead.
You're dead, yeah. And, they do that all the time, yeah.
It's just so many things.
Simon says it to the kid playing soccer. You're dead. Because he kicks the ball at him like that. Yeah, it's throughout the film.
Just
brilliant. And like what's great about Peter Serafinowicz, well, he plays.
I love Peter Serafinowicz every time.
He plays the roommate who gets mad. There's that great scene where they come back drunk from the pub and they're like, you know, they're electro funk and he comes out and now there's 7. Yeah, go ahead.
Because obviously they're my generation, and when he brought out electro, so when I was a kid, we used to listen to electro. I actually had that album at one point.
Dude, I did too.
I was like, wow. I mean, who even knows what electro is anymore? So
we'll get to the albums in a second for sure. But when they start throwing at them, I get very upset about him throwing Batman soundtrack.
Can we just say how? I mean, for such a small budget movie, relatively speaking, how great was the action?
Yeah. Yeah, it really was. A really great action scenes. But we'll get to that one thing I just want to say real quick about Pete. So apparently in the movie, there's 77 uses of the word fuck. And I think Serafinowicz has half of them in that one scene alone where he comes out at 4 a.m. He's like, you're the fucking this, But there's a funny thing they talk about, and it's actually on the DVD extra, where they had to make do some ADR for, I guess, an airplane viewing, they said. So they changed it to funk. So he's literally saying, it's funky 4 o'clock in the funky morning. What the fuck? So he became known as Funky Pete. And hearing it on the DVD extra, it might be on YouTube, is hilarious. There's what the funk is wrong with you and all this stuff. But onto the records, when Mary first showed, they start throwing the records and they go through all those records. That record collection, I was like, like you, Dave, I probably had half those albums. I was very upset. Very upset that they threw the Batman soundtrack. Well, he's like, yeah, toss it.
The story about the records is that they did approach some artists. So Sade was very up for it.
Yes, she was.
It was going to be David Bowie, wasn't it? And it was going to be deciding between them, and they were going to throw the Let's Throw the Labyrinth soundtrack. Yeah. But they just decided that the joke of the 3 different Prince soundtracks was just a good one, and they're right. It is.
Yeah. I think Sade and only one other person were the only ones that were like pretty, like, yeah, cool, go ahead, use our stuff.
Were they all right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
but the choice of music was great. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and they got to use the 2 Queen songs, which is amazing.
That must have been their whole. Well, I know they wrote to Brian May and begged him to use it, but so did that mean they got it really on the cheap? They must have, because that would have been their whole budget, I imagine.
Yeah,
they shot the sequence with it, so it's one of those things. It wasn't. They weren't quite asking for forgiveness rather than permission. But they were sort of in that territory, weren't they? And I'm sure it would have helped him showing him a rough cut.
Yeah. but onto
so
that.
well used though.
Yeah,
So
it really was.
But I mean, you know, that's really an Edgar Wright, you know, signature. And I mean, this was his first full-length feature, right? Wasn't it? Had he made a movie before this?
I think it was his first.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
I mean, you really do see a talent, you know, bursting out into film, like fully, you know, fully realized, you know, and just, you know, the cuts. I mean, all the signatures, and you know, again, like I'm a huge Scott Pilgrim fan, which, you know, misunderstood film. Some like.
I think
some
it's
don't.
a perfect film.
Right.
I love that film.
Oh, well,
I didn't like it.
wow, we gotta do the man. We gotta have somewhere where
We'll do
we're
it.
not all on board with the film, because that would be funny. But anyway, and you know, of course, Baby Driver again. You know, just like, I mean, a lot of the things that he used here, you know, he's perfected in Baby Driver with the incredible action, the incredible cutting the scene to the music, and you know, the multiple viewpoints, just every character you're invested in and everything. I mean, he's just really such a good
Great
filmmaker.
camera shots,
And I
yeah,
mean,
for sure.
just, you know, a moment of silence for Edgar Wright's Ant-Man. I mean, I guess it just wouldn't have been fitting in with the MCU vision, you know. But man, that would have been such a great movie. And maybe now they could do it, you know, now that that certain things seem to have loosened up in the MCU just a little bit. So
yeah, for sure.
I've got one other thing which you may know, Jimmy, just while we were talking about the use of music. The actor Steve Emerson, who played the landlord, had been a stuntman in Brannigan, which is that famous West Wayne film which was shot in the UK, and had been thrown into a jukebox by John Wayne.
Oh, I didn't know that. I knew he was in Brannigan, but I didn't know. Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
See, just those little touches are just all these homages that none of us, unless we do these deep dives, really get. But it's just to satisfy themselves. Like, oh, we got to throw him in a jukebox. You could probably see them just being all giddy. Like, we got to do that. That'd be great. 5 people will get it, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so brilliant. And the fact about the whole thing where, you know, how in Romero movies, in any zombie movie, they almost never say the word zombie. And Simon Pegg's character is like, don't use the Z word. Why? That's ridiculous. Like, it's so great. Just all these little subtle little things they throw in there.
So, you know, I will say, all right, and now huge spoiler. If you haven't seen
Please,
Shaun of the Dead, stop right now. Okay,
Should've
get
stopped
off.
30 minutes ago.
Stop. I know that. But no, because this is really, because I will say this zombie movie did shock me, because you know, most of them end with some horrible irony of, you know, and what's going to happen, or maybe things are okay. I mean, it's, you know, that's the thing about zombie movies, I think, that makes them popular, is that there's this uncertainty about where the world is going. But in this one, the British Army shows up and tanks and kills all the zombies. It's like the most upbeat zombie movie ending of all time. And I'm like, what? They're saving them? And then we see that society has actually adapted to use the zombies as a slave army, or some pals, you know. But
entertainment,
I mean, I think, you know, this being a comedy obviously was a little bit more, and there were some dark moments.
What was great was watching those zombies on TV. So if you're a Brit, then the TV shows that they were on, you would know. Genuine TV shows, like, you know, Trisha is you know, she was a great daytime host for a while. I remember Trisha well. I'm like, that's Trisha. There's Keith Chegwin.
And they real like news journalists on there. The guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was Coldplay, wasn't it? Chris Martin also, like, you know.
Yeah, Vernon Kay was with Coldplay. And then the DVD extra, there's an extended version of that as well. Yeah, it's like all those bits they show in the DVD extras. There's a whole thing where they show a longer scene of the Trisha scene, where they show beforehand where the lady and her husband, before he's a zombie, are having issues, and she really loves him, but he's sort of like, you know, he's sort of like Shaun, where he's sort of like aimless and doesn't really do anything. And then later on, he's back as but I love him. He's like, do you sleep with it? You know, like that.
Right?
So
yeah.
great.
Like,
don't judge me, Trish. Don't judge me.
And then the Coldplay one is extended, and they have them improv a lot, which was kind of fun to watch them to go into that. But also there's this great thing where they do a flip chart thing where you see Edgar and Simon. They literally have this giant paper where it's a flip chart of the whole movie they came up with. So it's all this writing, just a lot of this mishmash. It looks like a madman's plan to take over the world. And it's probably 30, 40 pages. And it's great because this is our original plan. And they talk about, oh, this didn't make it in the movie. oh, as you can see, this is the gestation of that. Oh, all that made it in, which is great. And it's a kind of a nice little behind the scenes thing there, which I thought was really cool. But another one I wanted to mention going on to was plot holes. So they have this thing called plot holes in the DVD extras, and they mentioned 3 of them. They use animatics sort of with it. And so the first one is, what happened to Shaun when he ran off from the pub? Like he dives into a army of zombies and somehow makes it through. Like when even Dylan's character was like, how'd you get? I escaped the slip. Not that hard, David. You know, like I love how he's so sensitive to David. The way he says David's name, David. You know, and he does that thing. He's so great. So apparently, they show the animatic of him. He basically just runs around, leads them around, hides in a skip, and then when he thinks the coast is clear, he runs back to the Winchester. Now, what happened to Diane when she left the Winchester with his leg in hand? So apparently, and it's narrated. The first was narrated by Simon. This was narrated by Lucy Davis. So she cuts a path through the zombies with the leg. Okay. Scales up a nearby tree, passes out, wakes up several days later, eating his leg to survive, and then she climbs down and went to Birmingham to live with her aunt, but stays in Christmas contact with Shaun and Liz. And then just brilliant. So if there ever was the sequel, she'd be back.
Oh, I'm glad that she was okay.
Yeah, I was glad. I was like, okay, I want her to survive. So in 3, the last one, how did Ed
survived eating her ex-boyfriend's leg?
I know. How did Ed get from the Winchester cellar to the shed, which is that big? Like, what happened? So Nick Frost narrates this. So after Shaun and Liz leave, he shoots 2 of the zombies, and then a large one sort of falls on him, and he's underneath the stairs, and it sort of blocks him from the other ones. So he's sort of safe. So the army doesn't discover him, and he passes away. Shaun finds him a week later, and tempts him back with his own body back to home to their shed.
Didn't they do some of these stories though in a comic book? Because there were Shaun of the Dead comics.
2000 AD.
Yeah,
2000 AD did a short, and they show that on the DVD extra as well. 2000 AD did a short in the 2004 edition, number 1384, written by Simon, Edgar, and Fraser Irving. Yes, did the art. And it was called "There's Something About Mary." So it's great. It's basically we follow Mary, the worker, it's named Lansing, Mark, which is named after, or not Lansing. What's it called? It's named after the director. American Werewolf in London.
David Naughton.
Landis.
Landis.
Sorry, Landis.
Landis.
Yeah. So Landis. Yeah. So it's named after him. There's a lot of things named after famous like directors, like that. So she's working there. Some creepy guy is asking her for a kiss. And she's like, get away. And he ends up kind of following her. So she runs into the Winchester and sits with an older guy to sort of like, this guy's following me. Sure. So he suddenly starts getting sick. He's clearly been bitten earlier. So she walks him home and then he bites her. And that's how she turns. And then creepy guy shows up again, who in the movie is the big dude with her in the backyard. So she bites his face off. So that's how he lost his lip and everything like that. So that does it. And then like she gets to his house because as she's ambling along, she sees the drunk Shaun and Ed leaving the thing to singing White Lines, and she sort of follows them and ends up in their backyard. So that's kind of cool. That's a nice little backstory for Mary. But the one with sorry,
just while we've been talking, I've realised one of the reasons why this film is so lovely is it sort of makes you cherish ordinary life by putting it into this extreme scenario. Like, the flat that his girlfriend lives in, it's just all coppery and it's nice plants. And I just recognise that kind of, if it's a 1930s or a 1950s block, but it's a really nice block of flats. And just the suburban streets and his mum's house. I don't know, I just thought it's a celebration of everything mundane about Britishness that is not normally celebrated.
But
it becomes totally heroic.
But I think that's the subtext of a lot of zombie films, I mean, they are almost always some kind of critique on society. And I mean, certainly the
British settings. I mean, to us, all your American settings are inherently glamorous. Even the suburban ones of all those kind of 80s comedies. Whereas
Right.
British settings always just seem so dull in comparison. I'm just remember the 80s, and I'd go and see films like Ferris Bueller's Day Off to fantasize about this much more glamorous equivalent life of high school.
Right.
You know,
Well, it starts with Ghost Town, the famous song by the Specials that was about, like the drabness and, unemployment, like a really bleak time in British life, so.
well, that was specific to the early 80s. Which
Yeah.
now, so it's slightly different to. This is about celebrating suburban ordinariness, whereas I mean, a song like Ghost Town is actually about city centres being emptied because of massive economic crisis and recession. To be fair, so they're not quite comparing the same.
Right. Right.
And so there's something very affectionate about it, and it's just not many films pull that off in England.
Yeah,
I think that's why
that's why
so remarkable.
I think some people enjoyed it because it was such. A lot of people lead that mundane life, They kind of like, oh, that's me. Either they were Ed, where I'd sit at home all day playing video games, or they're Shaun, like I'm in a job that I don't necessarily love. I'd like to do better. I got a girlfriend. I don't know. I got to go back home. Yeah, so it's sort of the same, like you said. This mundanity is that a word? I don't know. And
I think. I mean, I don't know if it's changed. My DVD might be quite some years old. It's an 18 certificate, which is, I mean, here I know our certificates are different to America, where an NC-17 is quite a serious deal. But here, we have very strict age settings. And
right, you have certificate 15, things like that, whatever
15,
it is.
Most violent zombie films, I think these days would be a certificate 15 because it's the kind of special effects which is not realistic in a way. And swearing nowadays doesn't get an automatic 18 or even a 15. This is at the moment, I think, still an 18, and I think it's because it's moments of violence, like particularly Dylan Moran's death, really quite unpleasant. But because of the humour, I mean, I watched that, and I'm not a fan of violent films, but I could watch this happily because I think the humour does so much to disarm the violence without making the violence seem trivial. It's just the two together are a remarkable combination.
It doesn't exacerbate it. What?
And then, right, good one. And then when we see, like David's death, Dylan Moran's character, I mean, he has a horribly gruesome.
It's an homage to another zombie film, yeah.
Right. But I mean, if anybody's going to be seen having their guts ripped out and eaten in front of them, it's got to be the really, the dick,
the jerk,
the total jerk guy.
Weasel.
So, the weasel, it just, it all fits. So.
Yeah, they said in the commentary that Liz and Lucy, that was the first time seeing all those effects, and she's like, those were raw reactions. Apparently, Kate Ashfield was genuinely freaked out by the zombies in makeup a lot, and would like constantly like sort of jump when they'd be like get a little freaked out by them. So her in that scene is her really screaming.
He used it very well. The scene when Simon Pegg first goes to the fuse box to try and turn the electrics back on, and he turns one switch, and the light comes on just outside the glass door. All those zombies just
that's great.
And then he switches it off again. And there's moments like that where they use those extras really powerfully, just the power of the numbers.
It's brilliant.
Sorry, David.
I've just discovered something amazing. So the movie Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes, I know you're going with this. Yeah.
This has just blown my mind. So they wanted something to show that they're in an alternative universe.
Yes, the sequel.
In the background, there's is it Times Square? Is it?
Yeah, Times Square. Yeah.
It's alternative universe Times Square. In the background, they've got a movie poster for the sequel From Dusk Till Dawn.
Yeah, that was the running joke with them of what they would call a sequel. So
that's incredible. I had no idea.
I love it. I
love that movie. Cool. I've seen it like 3 times now, and I've missed that. I now I've got to go and watch it again.
Yeah,
that was we watched in lockdown. Into the
Oh, so good, right?
Yeah. I could watch that movie 1,000 times. I've seen it
literally in my top 3 of superhero movies.
Oh, nice!
It's a masterpiece.
Yeah, that was a running joke amongst Edgar and Simon. If they did a sequel, they would call it From Dusk Till Dawn. They even say that in the commentary. And they talked about a sequel, and then they just felt like they decided to go a different direction.
Very smart.
Yeah, the Cornetto trilogy.
We need more decision making like that. We don't need
exactly.
Perfect. It stood alone. It did its job. It set up the rest of the Cornetto trilogy.
Yeah, exactly. So what I thought was interesting too is like mentioning what Samira's talking about, but there was a UK poster, I don't know if in America, where it's just Shaun and he's shoved up against a glass, and there's all these zombies surrounding him. and I think that the tagline is something like, "Do you ever feel like you're not alone?" or something like that. And it got back in the news recently. Do you guys remember this? What happened recently? So it came in the news because over here in America, maybe is why, because was it in Ohio, Heidi, or somewhere where
I think
they
it was
stormed the Capitol,
Wisconsin,
because they were they were upset about the right wing and the Trumpers were upset about something again. So
about having to be be careful.
And the doors were locked, and they were like pressing their face against the window. And so many people like brought that poster up. We're like, this seems familiar. And compared it to that. Yeah.
Well, did anybody see the little film, The Plan?
Yeah, they did.
That Peg and Frost made. Yeah. So I think it's like
in
March.
April. They 20th. Did in April. You mean around March or April?
It might have just been the end of March. It was just right when all this sugar began, and the two of them made a little film where it's called The Plan. You can see it on YouTube. It's like a minute.
It's like 2 minutes long. Yeah. Maybe.
And it's just, obviously the first time they were doing a Zoom movie that they couldn't do it, but they're just like, so what's the plan? And they talk about, it's kind of like a public service announcement for COVID-19.
It's really cute. Yeah.
Interestingly, though,
I'm making a note to go and have a look at.
Right. You gotta. Interestingly, though, at that time, we were not told to wear masks, so they don't mention masks. They just say, it was so early, like we didn't know any of the terms.
Do the right thing. Call your lonely friends.
Yeah, call your lonely friends.
Take care of yourselves.
Take care of yourself, but it didn't mention like social distancing or, a lot of the buzzwords. The keywords that we've come to live with for the last 6 months. So, but it's really sweet and cute. Also, just a little homage.
Well, there's also a great thing they do, because how things don't age very well. Of course, when Shaun expresses his love to Liz in the movie, well, I love her, and then like Nick's here just goes, okay, gay. So they bring this up in The Plan, and Simon goes in this long dissertation about like, that wasn't a thing against homophobia. It was a thing. It was to show the side of the men, the toxic men. It was this really great little explanation that you have to watch. But it's really, really fun.
Well, again, it shows you how well they got the tone of that film. That's the only thing that they had to issue a correction.
I can think of one other, but when Ed gets out of the car and says, "What's up?" and I won't say the word, he uses the N word when he's the N word. Yeah,
does the N word. Yeah,
that was my only other. I was like, and again, it's to make him look like, because he's an idiot. He would say something like that. So I get it.
It's interesting, though.
I would say, I know that the current Black Lives Matter, even in the UK, has changed things, but I do still get the comic context in which.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, I understand what they were going for the character. Yes.
Yeah.
The character is an idiot. He would say something like that. Right.
It's no Aunt Jemima.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious about the rating of there. So over here, it was. I'm thinking R rating, of course. So I'm not as familiar with yours.
I thought that baffling American.
Yeah. But like I said, there were 77 fucks. I think only one C word one time.
Yeah.
And I think they mentioned some of the commentary, like had they used another one, it would have been even a higher rating. Like had they used the C word more than once or something like that. But you could have 77 F words, but only one C word.
There's no
something like that.
Sexual content in that film. I interviewed John Waters, and we had quite an interesting conversation about the NC-17 rating of Dirty Rotten Show. And it is, I mean, I'm not saying it's the greatest film, but it's a film with actually no sex and no violence, but it's all about sexual deviance. And I just think the way censorship works in American cinema is baffling. And it's interesting seeing, Netflix, where of course they do technically give ratings, but people can access it much instantly. I don't know, maybe all those ratings are breaking down, but it just struck me that Shaun of the Dead is a film which is genuinely violent, but the comedy is so warm-hearted that although I was shocked to see it was an 18 in a way, I just kept thinking it would be a 15. I don't know, David, what did you think? Are you surprised it's an 18?
Yeah. It's so weird because I grew up in that time where if you had one F word, it was an 18, and my head is still kind of in that. It is still kind of in that place, and now I've got really young children. I feel like I've gone even more prudish than ever. So part of me is like, but
you're like, oh my stars and garters.
But that's the dichotomy of my head.
For slugging
in my head, I'm like, They could have, all the violence, people being torn apart doesn't bother me. But you went, how many fucks? Oh, that's no, that deserves
77.
Yeah, it needs an 18 for 77 of those.
Yeah.
But I hadn't even considered that for the violence. So if that rating is based on violence, I mean, I think it's such stylized violence, it's such unrealistic violence that it doesn't even matter that much. There are much.
You rate a lot of films. I mean, I'm struck by how few films have an 18 rating in the UK now. 15 is common. I mean, I think before that, very violent. That big church massacre with knights. That's a 15, wasn't it?
So it goes from 15 to 18 is the next level. There's nothing in between.
A PG, which is basically for all, but with a bit of menace. And then they have a 12, which is interesting. Very occasionally they have had a certificate which is a PG-12 or a PG-13, saying you can take younger children to see it, but actually you might want to rethink that. So quite a lot of guidance given in. And then a 50, which is the old AA. We used to have 4 certificates, which is UA, AA, and X. And U was everybody, A was sort of more adult content. So like Jaws would have been an A. And a AA would have been only over 14, and that was particularly for swearing. And then X certificate was your equivalent of an R, but it was over 18s. And in theory, they still enforce that with ID checks.
We're just like whatever. I mean, I go to R-rated movies and people bought their babies. I mean, not that they'll remember it,
in New York.
Whatever.
People don't care in New York.
We probably should to start wrapping. I know we have a couple thousand people.
Yeah, I also have my little.
But I'm just going to say, I know we have, shout out to John and Stephanie. If you have any questions, put them in chat and we'll answer them. But Jimmy's.
So Samira, what I like to do when we talk about films, I like to recast them for modern times. If we did this, so I know this is not that old, and because I'm Filipino background, I'm a former actor. I like to cast them with not as white. So I know it's a very British film, so I want to try to keep it to British actors.
I did notice watching it today how
it's very white.
Very, very.
So here is my cast if it were done today.
Okay.
So Shaun, Dev Patel. I think Dev Patel would be great. As Ed, I know she's white, but I love Roisin Conati. I think she'd be great. But maybe not her, but Asim Chaudhary as Heidi won't know him, but he's Chabuddy G. The Brits know him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fairways safety adverts.
I think he'd be a great Ed. Yeah, especially Dev and him together might be kind of cool. As Liz, Jessica Henwick, who we know from, of course, she was the only good thing in Iron Fist. She was Colleen Wing. She was also in Game of Thrones. The only good thing in Iron Fist was Jessica Henwick. That's a whole other podcast. She could be Liz. And as Diane, Katie Leung, who was the unfortunately named Cho Chang in the Harry Potter series.
God, she's a good actress.
Yeah, she really is. She'd be a great Diane. For Dylan's character David, I like to see Henry Golding. I know he plays the charming, like Crazy Rich Asians, and he was in Last Christmas, but I'd like to see him sort of play the heel. I think it'd be kind of fun to watch him play that. Yeah. For Barbara, the mother, Michelle Yeoh, would be fantastic. My God.
You just know she take out the zombies.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, they'll be a little different, right? She could be the one like taking them out. Yeah. And for Philip, Lenny Henry. I think Lenny would be great. Because I think he can be a little big, but he's a good actor. We could tone him down. For Yvonne, Jessica Stevenson's character, Gemma Chan, who I love, Gemma Chan.
Yes.
God, I love Gemma Chan so much. I got to interview her once, and I was like,
"Who doesn't love Gemma Chan?" Another one.
I have a picture of her and I've like framed it now, but I haven't. For Peter Serafinovich's character, Pete, Ricky Whittle, who was recently in American Gods. He was also in but he's just a really like tall, fit guy. Like I think he'd be really great, and he's British. So and finally, I think it'd be directed by Gorinda Chadha, who of course famously directed Bend It Like Beckham.
My mother's been in the Gorinda Chadha film.
Yeah. So
she's a great director. I love what I do.
Yeah, so that's my modern day casting. Dave, I'd put you in it somewhere.
I was biding my time.
Yeah. Dave, okay, forget Lenny Henry. You could play. You could play Philip.
In that film, David. If you could choose your own part.
Yeah, who would you play?
Shaun.
I was trying to keep it around the ages that they were when they shot
So
it.
here's the thing. So my daughter and I, my 5-year-old and I, we recently auditioned for a children's show on a popular BBC children's channel, which I'm not allowed to say what it's called.
Sabibis.
I wonder what it could be called. And so we did it, and I'm like this. I've got my lockdown beard, my recently re-emerging dreadlocks, but the headshot that they had of me is no beard and short hair. So I was like, what are they going to make of how I look now? And they came back and they said, we love your hair, we love your beard. Could you play Kira's grandfather?
Yeah.
It's like,
oh man,
right to the
Ouch.
heart.
Ouch.
Ow.
Well,
but it's like, so my wife just looked at me and goes, so we're there, are we? And I was like, and I think when it hit me, I was looking at Star Wars and going, yeah, John Boyega's got my part, but if it was me, they'd probably cast me for his father, not
that's
for
what
that
I'm saying.
part. And
I
I have moved on, and I've got to come.
I'm
to
just
terms
keeping
with
it real, Dave. Like
Yeah.
like you and I could be the older versions of Shaun and Ed. I'd be a great Ed. Come on.
shame in moving on to the parental roles.
That's
This is
right.
Ryder as the mother of Spock.
Yes.
Spock.
Yeah.
You know, my
Absolutely.
daughter told me I was only in her top 10 of top mothers, and Winona Ryder was number 1.
Oh my
I need
God.
to revise that. She said, no, you're in my top 3.
Okay.
You're like good because you were about to be kicked out. That's amazing.
I'm going to disagree with Winona Ryder was number 1.
Well,
That's great. So I know Dave has to run. So we could probably shut it down here. But any final thoughts on Shaun of the Dead, kids? We did mention briefly the Cornetto trilogy. If you don't know, Hot Fuzz was the second film, and then The World's End, where they're not really connected. They're just considered. Cornetto in the UK is a type of ice cream, and
yeah, it's the ice cream cone he goes out to get Fenwick fast.
yeah, and each movie had like a color flavor to sort of represent which it was. So yeah.
Delicious ice
Great
cream.
little film. It will cheer you up. If you don't know
Yes.
what watch this.
That's right. That's right. So final thoughts on Shaun of the Dead, anybody?
Well, just as a newcomer to it, I loved it. I haven't seen Hot Fuzz either, so I guess
watch it.
I know.
I love Hot
All right,
Fuzz.
I'm gonna just go out and I'm gonna binge all the Edgar Wright movies. All right, I'm just gonna binge them because obviously I as I say sometimes I put off watching things that I know I'll enjoy because I want to have things to look forward to. But you know what? We don't know what's going to happen in the world, so I should watch it, especially rewatch.
That's why I'm watching all of Netflix right now.
I know that, yeah. So just delightful, just a delightful film, and that says. As timeless as it was for 9/11, as it is for the pandemic.
That's right.
And that's the thing for me. I loved it when I first saw it, and I think we rewatched it either late last year or early this year. Can't quite remember. And it just didn't feel. I mean, it obviously aged because of circumstance. You could smoke in pubs, etc., etc. But it didn't feel old. It still felt relevant. It still felt. I enjoyed it just as much rewatching it years later as I did when I originally watched it. I thought it was a masterpiece.
I would say I feel quite nostalgic for it because I think it represents, and I don't mean this in a political way necessarily, but I just think it represents a time in Britain when people were happier, and it represents the best of us, like fighting adversity. And right now in Britain, it feels very divided, a bit like America, I imagine, where it's not just over Brexit, but over the pandemic, over masks, over everything. It feels like we're at loggerheads, and this one just celebrates a happier time where it feels like there's a spirit of, you can fight anything with a sense of humour.
Yes,
and a cricket bat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yes. If only we could. But thank you again for joining us. I know, Samira, we've tried to meet up the past couple of years. She was so sweet last year. So we were trying to meet up. We kind of had set up, okay, we're going to meet up. And then she goes, oh, Jimmy, please forgive me. I'm in the middle of a tribunal. I'm like, oh, that's right. You're suing the BBC for equal rights, and she won.
Yes.
By the way, congratulations.
Ooh, amazing.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Yes. I was like, that's a little more important than being some dumb nerd from New York. So yes, please. I understand completely. It's so nice.
Oh, thank you.
That was weird.
Hey, it was necessary, and I'm so glad you did it. And of course, you won. That was great.
Yeah.
But thank you. We'd love to have you back anytime.
Yeah.
Thank you. Such a lot. I've just come home from work, and it's just been so lovely to sit in your company and talk about a lovely film.
Oh, thank you so much.
I've learned so much, and I've got a list of things to go and watch now.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Yeah. I have to send you maybe we could send you a list of something to watch and like that you haven't seen. and then we could like go from there. You're the one that hasn't seen it yet.
Yeah,
like,
it's always fun. Well,
Yeah,
Jimmy
for
and
sure.
I always say this: doing this is actually one of the highlights of our week. It's in these times, in these uncertain times, as we
get
call
to see
them.
faces and talk to people,
Yeah,
friends, new friends, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. So we hope, anyway, to everybody listening, I hope it's a break for you too.
Yeah, enjoy it. So thank you everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed this. Once again, if you're checking this out right now on Zoom or YouTube Live, this will also be an audio podcast on my podcast, Comic News Insider. We'll release it tomorrow, and you can listen in that and let us know what you think on social media. But I'm Jimmy Aquino with the weekly podcast, Comic News Insider, covers comic books, TV, film, and pop culture at comicnewsinsider.com. You can find me. I'm just at Jimmy Aquino, JimmyAquino, Twitter, Instagram, the socials, etc.
And again, I'm Heidi MacDonald, the editor-in-chief of The Beat at comicsbeat.com. And you can find me on all social media at Comixace, Comixace.
I'm David Monteith from Geek Syndicate, doing exactly what Jimmy does, but in the UK. You can find me on at David Monteith or at Geek Syndicate across all social media platforms.
And I'm Samira Ahmed. I'm on Twitter at Samira Ahmed UK, and I'm lurking in all kinds of weird places.
Very good.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it for listening, and we'll see you next week where we discuss, I don't know. We got
to figure out.
Rothko, art, or just squares. I don't know.
I don't know. It's fall preview. We'll find out. We always figure it out afterwards. Anyway, take care, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And bye. Okay. And hold on. Oops. How do I stop this?
You hit stop record.
I do, but I have to.
Got the hand up.
I do.